Haiti's president has stepped down, but the opposition still reject a deal agreed with Parliament, and Colombians decide on how to ratify a final peace deal. My name is Reagan, Vignes, and this is From the South. Thank you so much for joining us. First up, the Haitian opposition has said it will refuse to accept the agreement for a transitional government made over the weekend between Congress and former President Michel Martelly. Opposition presidential candidates call the agreement a parliamentary coup. The deal follows weeks of protests and two postponed elections. The Haitian Prime Minister Evans Paul said it proved that dialogue was the way forward.
The weapons of mobilization aren't necessary today because dialogue takes priority. The dialogue that produced this agreement. That means dialogue with all sectors, with those in power, those in the opposition, those on the streets and civil society, so that we can bring about the Haitian political miracle.
President Michel Martelly gave a final speech to the National Assembly on Sunday before stepping down as scheduled. According to the agreement for an interim government reached over the weekend, Haiti's parliament will elect an interim president for 120 days. A new round of elections will be held in late April.
The National Assembly is going to elect an interim president and choose a prime minister so that we have a consensus government with the goal of finishing this electoral process and for us to have a president elected by May 14 for the presidential inauguration. This is the most important process at this moment.
The campaign for Peru's presidential elections in April has been clouded by accusations against several of the leading candidates. Our correspondent in Lima, Rael Mora, has more.
While candidate Keiko Fujimori is stagnant in the polls, with about 30% of the vote, two of the candidates that follow her confront serious problems. One is Cesar Acuña, who faces several accusations of plagiarism. The most recent is for claiming the authorship of a book written by someone else. Once again, the candidate for an Alliance for Progress denied the crime.
I would love for someone to come and show that in this book the two of us appear as co-authors.
The other candidate with a problem is Julio Guzman, who registered for the elections through a little-known party with no significant following. According to the National Elections Board, this party has not followed the obligatory rules for registering a candidate. Guzman defends himself by claiming political persecution.
We are not going to allow them to take away our chance, and we are going to continue growing. What we are going to do in these last days is continue our campaign door by door, talking to everyone.
This campaign has more accusations flying, but in terms of policies, the majority of candidates continue to offer more of the same. One of the few who proposes change is Veronica Mendoza, and she has been attacked by the main local media.
No. First, because this constitution was put in place by a corrupt and criminal government whose leader is in prison precisely for corruption and human rights violation. And secondly, because there are so many things wrong with this constitution that I think it is perfectly legitimate. We have to change it.
With 2 months left until election day, the situation is unpredictable. Every day a new scandal breaks around one or other of the 19 candidates. New polls will be released this week, and they should show whether any of the most recent accusations have damaged the politicians in question. Rael Mora, TeleSur, Peru.
The lead negotiator of the Farc rebel group has said that Colombia's second largest guerrilla army, the ELN, should be included in the peace talks taking place in Havana. According to Iván Márquez, any peace deal without the National Liberation Party would be incomplete.
The National Liberation Army cannot remain outside the peace process. We have evidence that confirms that their leadership wants to start on peace talks as soon as possible with the Colombian government. Peace without the ELN would be an incomplete peace.
Sin el ELN sería una paz incompleta.
A United Nations-sponsored forum on the Colombian peace process has begun in Bogotá. Our correspondent Natalia Margarita was there and joins us now live. Hi Natalia, it's good to see you. How does this forum fit into the peace process and what can we expect to come out of it?
Yes, the Colombian government and the FARC get closer to reach a final peace deal in Havana, Reagan. This forum is intended to open up a space for the participation of civil society here in Colombia in order to discuss the only 2 points of the negotiation agenda that are pending. That is the definitive and bilateral cessation of hostilities on the one hand, and on the other, the implementation of the peace accords, meaning the mechanisms that are still yet to be defined so that these peace agreements of Havana between the FARC and the government can get successfully implemented here in Colombia. Now, it is important to clarify that this forum comes after both peace delegations in Havana jointly requested the United Nations as well as the National University of Colombia to organize this forum, so that citizens here in Colombia can not just discuss these 2 issues that I just mentioned before, but also can write down their proposals in a way that these proposals can reach the negotiators in Havana. So today was the inauguration of this forum that will last for 2 more days, and some 700 representatives of different social organizations, and also including rural organizations, those residents of the rural areas most affected by the armed conflict here in Colombia, are participating in this forum. So we had really a very much diverse groups participating, just to mention some of them: victims groups, Afro-descendants groups, indigenous groups. All of them, as I said, will be participating in this forum over the course of 2 more days, and to generate those final proposals that they hope will successfully reach the negotiators in Havana, Reagan.
That's fantastic. Natalia, can you tell us what types of questions or suggestions that civil society are putting forward?
Well, for instance, in the issue of definitive and bilateral cessation of hostilities, social organizations today called on the Colombian government to finally agree to a bilateral ceasefire. Let's remember that for more than 6 months, the FARC have been unilaterally implementing a ceasefire. So they have said that it is time enough for the government to finally reciprocate that unilateral ceasefire so that we can have finally a bilateral ceasefire. Also, something very important to highlight here, Reagan, it's a concern that is very much present among all social organizations, and here I'm talking about the issue of paramilitarism. They say that as long as the government does not commit to dismantle paramilitary structures here in Colombia, it's going to be very difficult to have a comprehensive peace. Let's remember that these paramilitary groups continue to be a threat to social leaders in the rural areas, and in general, the social organizations and political leaders here have considered paramilitarism to be, at the moment, the biggest threat to peace construction in Colombia.
It's fantastic involving the civil society. Hopefully we can touch base with you again tomorrow. Natalia, thanks so much.
Back to you, Reagan.
Moving on, Caribbean countries are aiming for a joint approach to tackling the Zika virus, and the region's main tourist organizations are urging visitors not to cancel their travel plans. Alison Kentish reports from St. Lucia.
The Caribbean is tackling the mosquito-borne Zika virus on many fronts, chief among them health and tourism. On the health concerns, the region's leading authority, the Caribbean Regional Public Health Agency, CARPHA, is heading the charge. The agency is stressing the importance of the region taking firm measures to eliminate mosquito breeding. St. Lucia has no confirmed case of Zika, but the country's chief medical officer says health officials are concerned about the impact on pregnant women should the virus reach the island shores.
It can have some unwanted effects, particularly on the unborn child in pregnant women, and sometimes after persons have recovered in terms of the paralysis that it can cause. And so it's important for us to continue taking the same precautions that we took for dengue fever and for chikungunya. Ensure that we get rid of the mosquito breeding places.
To date, Zika has been confirmed in 5 of the 15 member countries of the Caribbean Community, CARICOM. St. Lucia's Cabinet of Ministers appointed National Health Security Committee met this week to review the Zika threat to the country. The committee's head says the goal is to also protect the fragile tourism industry in the region.
With the threat of Zika, immediately tourism sector began feeling the impact of it because they had certain levels of cancellations. Now once tourism is impacted,
CARFA representatives are expected to present a policy brief on the Zika virus at the intersessional meeting of CARICOM heads of government on February 16th in Belize. Alison Kentish, teleSur's, St. Lucia.
The next round of U.S. presidential primaries takes place in New Hampshire on Tuesday. Bianca Perez looks ahead.
The campaign trail continues to heat up as we're just 24 hours away from the New Hampshire primaries. On Saturday, Republicans took to the stage to debate a slew of issues, including immigration, foreign policy, and the economy. On the Democratic side, Hillary Clinton left New Hampshire for a brief period of time to make a visit to Flint, Michigan, and address the issue of contaminated water. This move was highly criticized by some as an attempt to gain votes. Her husband, Bill Clinton, took over her New Hampshire campaign, taking direct attacks at opponent Bernie Sanders. Sanders, on his part, continues to be very confident that he will win the state of New Hampshire. Bianca Perez, teleSur, Washington, D.C.
At least 27 migrants have died off the Turkish coast trying to reach the Greek island of Lesbos. 11 of the victims were children. According to the International Organization for Migration, about 400 people have died crossing into Europe so far this year alone. The German Chancellor Angela Merkel and the Turkish Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu have agreed to seek help from NATO in handling the refugee crisis.
We will use NATO defense ministers meeting to talk about the possibilities and to what extent NATO can help in monitoring the situation at sea and lend support to the European Union's border agency Frontex and Turkish Coast Guard.
At least 10 civilians have been killed in airstrikes on the Syrian city of Aleppo. On Sunday, Syrian rebels withdrew from 3 villages in Aleppo province, which borders Turkey, allowing Kurdish fighters to overrun them. Canada will end its bombing missions in Iraq and Syria by February 22nd. This was one of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's electoral promises. The government will keep 2 surveillance and refueling aircraft in the region. It will also triple the number of Canadian soldiers training Kurdish troops in northern Iraq. Trudeau said the new direction was the right thing to do.
The lethal enemy of barbarism isn't hatred, it's reason. And the people terrorized by ISIL every day don't need our vengeance, they need our help.
The Russian Secret Service, the FSB, has arrested 11 alleged terrorists in Yekaterinburg. It says the cell was plotting attacks in Moscow and St. Petersburg. Agents raided the suspect's home and found explosives, detonators, and grenades. Thousands of Nigerian workers have marched in the capital Abuja to protest against a 45% increase in electricity rates. The protest was organized by the country's 2 main labor bodies, the Nigeria Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress. According to the people who participated, the increase will most affect the nation's poor. An Australian woman who was freed by a group affiliated with Al-Qaeda has said that her husband is still alive. Jocelyn Elliott, who was held for 3 weeks, said she hoped her husband, Dr. Ken Elliott, would be released soon. Elliott returned to Burkina Faso, where she plans to continue her medical work. 2 days after a 6.4 magnitude earthquake hit Taiwan, an 8-year-old girl and her aunt were rescued. Rescuers pulled them out alive from the rubble of an apartment block that was badly damaged by Saturday's quake. The number of dead currently stands at 40, but could rise to at least 100. Now we head to the Gaza Strip, where Noor Harazin updates us on the case of a Palestinian journalist who is currently on a hunger strike.
Palestinian journalists and even Palestinian normal citizens continue their protest and set in protest and solidarity tents in solidarity with the Palestinian prisoner Mohammed Al-Qiq, who's a journalist that was arrested almost 3 months ago and started a hunger strike. Today he enters his 78th day in a hunger strike, and the Palestinian medical sources reported that his condition is very bad and he is on the verge of death. However, the international community and even the international community of the Red Cross are still silent regarding his issue. At the same time, in the West Bank, Israeli forces continue its raids on Palestinian villages and cities around the West Bank. Palestinian sources reported that the Israeli forces arrested around 20 Palestinians from different villages from the West Bank yesterday.
Despite increasing concern about the Zika virus in Brazil, the British Olympic Association and the Japanese Olympic Committee have repeated that they will take part in the Rio Olympics. The 2016 Olympic Games are scheduled to start in August in Brazil, where officials have estimated that over 1 million people have been infected with the Zika virus. Despite the impact of the Zika virus in Brazil, the carnival parades are taking place as scheduled in Rio de Janeiro and other cities, with hundreds of thousands of people taking part. On Sunday, the city's top samba schools headed the Rio Sambadrome parade venue, where they competed for the top prize. A museum in Brussels has come up with a novel way for artists to sell their art. On Sunday, during the 12th edition of the art exhibit, instead of money, people offered goods and services in exchange for the art they wanted to own. The event was aimed at drawing visitors who would not typically attend art shows. And that's how we wrap it for this evening, Monday evening. My name is Reagan Vignes. You can look for more on our website, telesurtv.net/English. And of course, you can join us on Facebook, Twitter, and on Instagram. Have a good evening. Bye.